Hello, my friends out there. Welcome to another edition of Gray Matters. This one deals with dating after 55, and it is called Love Resurrected. We have with us the charming Patriczia Petrous
Hi,
from good
everybody.
old Portland, and West Salem's Lee Coyne here. In any event, we're going to talk about what do we mean by Love Resurrected?
Well, I came across a writer for the Huffington Post, Lee, recently, which is a newspaper out of the East Coast, but
Yes.
it goes all over the country, of course, and they're online as well. And she's actually, they call her the high 50s columnist. She writes, she does for the newspaper what we do for CCTV. She talks about dating after 55. And I particularly like this article.
Okay. Let me just explain
Sure.
what Love Resurrected, the original question, is that when somebody has broken up or is divorced or widowed, widowered, they have to start again. And so part of today's show is how you start again after the interim of having someone else and now being
Exactly.
empty.
Exactly. That's exactly
Resurrection.
it. And these are some tips from her, the high 50s writer. She gives 3 tips on what she says is the most important decision you will make in your life, and that is who you choose to marry. And she means that both when you're 20, but she's speaking specifically now to
Yes.
people over 55 making that choice.
Us guys.
Perhaps again, or maybe for some people over 55 making that choice for the first time in their life. So anyway, so that's tip number 1, is to know that the most important decision you will have to make in your life is who you choose to marry. And she's so strong about that it's like a priority for her, that even regardless of what your career in life or whatever, the person you choose to spend your life with is really truly the most important decision.
Game changer.
Yeah, it's a game changer. And I remember telling my son, my married son, that he needs to make his marriage and his wife the priority, even over his business. And he's successful at both, the business and the life.
Interesting you say that because I've heard of people who are, quote, married to their business.
Well, that's exactly right. And I saw that in my first marriage, even though it resulted in 2 beautiful children. My former husband was very focused on his work to the point where I did not see him very much. And it really became a challenge in our marriage. So that's why I said to my son, this is the most important thing in your life, is your relationship with your spouse or your partner. And he said to me, I remember this, he said, Mom, I know where my comforts are.
Good.
And that was a really good response.
Valid.
I love that. The tip number 2, and I'm going to read from her a little bit
Okay.
so that you can get a sense of how she writes.
Take notes out there.
Okay, she says on our first date, her boyfriend at the time, Shelley, who did become her husband, took me to brunch. He was a widower and had been single for 5 years. After 2 hours, he looked at me and he said, I'm going to marry you. And here is his wise tip. So this is tip number 2. And I quote him. He said, I made a list of what I am looking for in a wife. And then he said, you meet all 7 qualities on my list. So she says, make your list, darlings, then follow it. So how do you feel about making a list of what you think are the most important qualities, Lee?
Well, some people are more organized than others. I like the idea of thinking before jumping into the frying pan,
Okay.
as it were, even if she is, quote, hot.
Even okay, so
Okay. In any event, but of course, it's different strokes for different folks. And I think some of the problems I have, and I guess other, is deciding what is really the priority, because in the 7, you might leave off some.
oh sure.
Or you could have a short list, a long list. You could have an unending list. Some people never are satisfied. There's always something else. But it begs the question, what do you need to make a coherent list for yourself? And, are you being fair to yourself in coming up? How abrupt will you make the list, or are you going to think it through?
Well,
different styles of decision making, really.
I agree with you on that. A list can be infinite. On the other hand, there might be, I would say, if I were making a list, and I haven't really had a list, but as I've been dating now,
Yes.
over 55, however, there are some things that are really important to each of us. And I think that's what she's saying, or that's what her husband, her new husband said, was that you need to kind of delineate those things that are absolutely priorities, and then let the rest flow.
Well, I think I said this in earlier shows, I like the idea of writing a job description.
Right.
And you're actually interviewing and hiring candidates for your spouse to be. And it actually forces you to put blinders on and don't deal so much with the superficial stuff like, oh, I like this kind of music and this kind of food and this kind of movies. In my opinion, and I'm not the be-all and end-all of gurus of love, but I think that what really makes a relationship, marriage last more is having parallel or equal ways of dealing with stress and setback.
That's a very good point.
The going out dancing, going to movies, listening to this concert, that's whipped cream on the cake in my book.
It is. Dealing with challenges in life is a really important thing. There's another aspect that you only made me think about now, Lee.
Yes.
I have to tell the viewers that I've never really in my life been too much into astrology. However, just a few years ago, I was introduced to something called Vedic astrology. There's another name for it called Jyotish. This is where Indian families kind of look at the astrological chart of their children and then...
American Indians?
No, I'm talking about
Asian Indians?
Asian Indians.
Okay, it's important to distinguish.
And that's when they match them up even very young. They match, and some of those marriages last really well. They match them according to their Jyotish or their Vedic astrology chart. One of the things I liked about a Vedic astrology chart, in case you're looking for an astrologer, it's not me, although I look at those charts.
You're starstruck anyway.
Thank you. Anyway, the point of them is that Vedic astrology is different from Western in that it's very, very much more specific. It is very specific. However, one of the significant factors of a Vedic astrology chart when you're looking and comparing yourself with prospective mates is that the rising sign needs to be different. This is interesting. Where, say I'm a Cancer rising and you're a Cancer rising, and people who know astrology understand that whether they're doing Vedic astrology or Western astrology, you do not want the same rising signs because you're going to be going to too many similar passages in life, and those passages will only be heightened, meaning if you're going to share the same ups and the same downs, and it's going to be too heightened, whereas you have different rising signs, say one's a Libra and one's a Cancer, or what have you, then the challenges are a little bit lightened, and there's two people to look at them. There's always somebody who's a little bit more objective. I think what the Vedic astrology says is that if two people have the same rising sign, it causes more subjectivity and less objectivity. Anyway, it's a point.
Yeah. Okay. I want to dovetail off of that. You gave me an interesting idea. On a first date with a new person, it might be worthwhile to take the day's horoscope, zodiac things, and make that as a point of discussion over coffee, tea, or whatever.
Yeah, those are...
And saying, how does that fit into your life pattern? This is what you are prescribed for the day, and is it reality to you? How would you deal with this advice?
It certainly is a topic, and many of the senior dating sites, and I think even the other dating sites now give your sign, so to speak, although that's going to differ in Vedic astrology, but we won't go there. There is something to that. Anyway, the third...
Yeah, I want to bring up another point. And I just thought of it. I think there are two diametrically opposed personalities in terms of a first or second date. There's one who prefers to be spontaneous, another one who prefers to be scripted. Now, I will tell you something very It's from my former wife,
Yes.
who's now deceased, and she was an industrial psychologist with AT&T years and years ago. She needed predictability. What she did is she put together a flow chart of opening lines that she would be fed in a bar or a party type situation, and then two different ways. If you want to encourage, she would say such and such. If she wanted to discourage, so she had it all mapped out and charted and put in her mind. She could not be spontaneous in meeting a person. It was too scary for her. And I think that's a very unusual kind of person that needs to have that kind of crutch to lean
Well,
on.
it does give her some comfort. On the other hand, what the Vedic astrologers say is you don't want people who are so alike with their rising signs that instead of where the difficult passages are heightened, as well as the happy passages. It's better to have two different rising signs. And we talk in Western about compatible rising signs. I won't go there, but that's the point of it. Is that
The zodiac work the same way?
it works a little differently. The
And then
Vedic
there's
astrology.
And then there's also the Chinese zodiac.
Oh yeah, the Vedic astrologers see the planets as being 23 degrees different from Western astrologers, but some Western astrologers are adapting that now because they see there's more detail and more exactness that comes out of that 23-degree difference. But that's something we can talk about on a show one day, and how to compare a chart and points that you could look for that even without a chart would be interesting.
I personally am less into astrology and would be more geared to the Myers-Briggs personality.
That's a good one
composition.
also. Yeah, I'm aware
So,
of that also.
yeah,
We'll talk about that one. That could be a
Okay.
topic one day.
And we'd like to hear from you. So we do get letters from the audience out there. So drop us a note. CCTV, 575 Trade Street, Southeast, Salem, OR 97301.
Okay, and we're still on the three top tips. One, know that choosing your partner is the most significant thing you can do in your life. Two, do have that little short list when you meet someone that at least they meet this and then more. And the third one was something that was really surprising to me. I've never, in all the research we've been doing, Lee, for the Dating Over 55 show, I haven't come across this one. My husband's, this is the writer for the Huffington Post talking about her new husband. My husband's other lesson on marriage, he says, the further you go from marrying your sister or your brother, the less chance you have for a successful marriage. Now, they are not saying marry your sister or brother. They're saying that if you go very far from the nature of what, say, your brother or your sister were, then you're probably going to find a less compatible person. And something this is the point I wanted to talk about. I was raised with three brothers, and it seemed like half or three-quarters of the men I met in my life, each reminded me of one of my brothers. So I would consider them not a good candidate for marriage. Do you see what I'm saying? Oh no, you're too much like my brother Paul, or you're too much, And I'd say, no, you'd be always reminding me of this brother or that brother. And now, as I get to be this age, I'm thinking, darn, my brothers had really set very high standards for the men in my life. They were very and are very good men, and I love this tip from these people to actually look for someone who resonates those qualities of your brother or your sister that you shared so much with in your lifetime. What do you think about that?
Mine is the opposite point of view. I have a sister down in Georgia, and she was very competitive from when she could first talk, and my father pitted us against each other as quintessential sibling rivals. So therefore, I would steer clear of anyone who was a prototype of my sister.
Okay.
And she probably similarly of me.
Well, the point she makes here, the Huffington Post writers, we have commonality with our sibs, she says. Our values, our faith, and even the foods we eat. There is value to this statement because we are usually in sync with our values and our likes and our dislikes. So on that level, no, very different, huh, Lee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like day and night. In fact, you talk about food. I love peanut butter, and I came after her with peanut butter, and she would run like she was in the Olympics.
Okay.
So,
Well, so that was those are the 3 tips. I personally like that last tip because for years I've avoided, if I've met someone who's like my brother, one of my brothers, I would avoid them. But really, in
I've
reality,
always said like your parents, because your parents are role models of what a marriage looks like. That's your first exposure
Right.
to a marriage, and the one that you know best probably before you go out and do shopping for your bride or groom.
well, you know, there is a psychological perspective that we tend to marry or choose our first caregiver. So if your mother was dominant as a caregiver when you were younger, then we tend to marry someone like that. If your father played a significant role, we tend to choose someone like that. And actually, in my first marriage, I did notice that did happen, because I would call my husband not by a brother's name. I would occasionally call him Mom. So I don't know what that says.
My father, and to some degree my first wife, were very domineering persons. My mother was much more compliant. Unlike I still remember we put together a marriage list, a wedding list, I should say, and there was somebody who had recently gotten divorced. My uncle, Barney, and my father wanted him at the marriage, and I said no, it's bad luck. And so when I had my wife-to-be talk about it, he says, "What do you think, you're talking to kids in the street?" He says, I'm the grown-up and you're the kid. We're not kids anymore. We're in our early 30s or so.
That's right.
But, you know, we wound up moving the wedding out of his house and having it elsewhere.
Well, yeah, because you were showing really that you were at this point in life, you were making
mature.
decisions.
We want to call the shots.
That's exactly right. Well, with some regard to our parents, there has to be. Anyway, if also by the same writer, her name, by the way, is Louisa Whitehead Payne, and she's the high 50s dating columnist for the Huffington Post, if you care to look her up online or however.
Okay.
But here's just to continue with the theme from the Huffington Post today, a dozen do's and don'ts of dating in your 50s and onward, and we'll look at some of them and then just comment on them. The first point is, what do you want from dating will vary. Love, sex, a good time, companionship. The best spirit is to combine optimism with a big dollop of humor. Then whatever the outcome, at least you will have had fun and some good stories on the way.
Okay, as you go through this, let's give our own answers if these questions are being posed to us. What do I want in a relationship?
Okay.
I want somebody who can engender trust. I want somebody who is not necessarily like me, but is mentally stimulating, even more than physically stimulating. I want someone whose face is, I wouldn't say just charming, but somebody who is vibrant, full of life, and has that kind of go, go, go attitude, and is willing to use your word incentive to try out new things, and is not competitive of anything you could do, I could do better, from the old Annie Oakley song.
You know, I agree with that not competitive thing. I think it's great to share ideas and uplift and raise another person's intelligence, and I do believe one doesn't have to be competitive to do that old one-upsmanship thing. So those are good points, Lee, and I tend to agree with them. I do like a person with a nice voice. I guess it's from my broadcasting background. I would like to hear a nice voice in my life.
Would you like to go on a date with Edward R. Murrow if he was still alive?
I don't know if that's exactly the kind of nice. He doesn't have to be a broadcaster. He just has to have a good, pleasant voice.
Yes,
And
I'm
stimulating.
affected by voices. We
Are
both
you?
grew up in a radio age.
Yeah.
Where
Radio
voice.
and some television, and now the internet. But anyway, I like to hear a nice voice. Okay, the next one, see
Yes.
your first date as a little taster meeting. In other words, the suggestion is don't get too involved with this first date. It takes the pressure off, as does having a few dates with different people arranged at the same time, meaning, in other words, if you're just starting out, arrange more than one date. Have one date for a Wednesday night, another one for a Friday afternoon, or another one for a Sunday afternoon, and then see all these people, and then carry on from there. What do you think about that, Lee? If you're on a website and you're on a dating site, I think it's
Well, my perception, or my experience really, has been that the first date is the testing ground on whether or not you want a second date.
exactly.
And I think some people are more positive. They're looking for things they have in common or compatible as opposed to compatible. And other people are looking for, I'm going to rule out this person because of such, and such. It's almost like a checklist of negatives, because some people come from negative experiences in their dating life.
In their
and
previous,
they don't want to repeat.
That's right. Or they think it's going to happen again. And we do attract similar things to ourselves.
Dating phobia, ta-da.
Yeah,
That's a whole subject in itself.
Right. If you know the Einstein quote about if you continue or repeat the same activity over and expect a different response,
Yes,
that
yes.
equals not being too smart. So you
Disconnected.
Yeah. So if you did have a bad experience because someone was, shall we say, an alcoholic, well, you certainly don't want to find somebody who consumes too much alcohol on that first date. Although some people will just because
Yeah,
they're
I
nervous.
want to not contradict it, but I want to leave a little opening for
Sure.
flexibility. If you personalities have certain patterns of conduct, and you can't just alter them overnight. If your earlier relationship and or marriage turns sour, and part of it may be due to your personality, does that mean that you have to change your whole personality to find another person for a relationship and or marriage? Or are you really looking for somebody who, unlike the first marriage, did not accept you, and are you out to find somebody who will accept you?
I'm not completely clear on that, but
Okay.
perhaps our audience-
What I'm saying is, you quoted Einstein's theory of if you repeat the same conduct, you get the same result. But if it's with a different person, you may not get the same result because their attitudes and their experiences will be different.
That's
So
actually true.
So you can't really do a one-size-fits-all, that your personality is either going to be rejected by everyone, accepted by everyone.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, so that's my premise, man.
That's what we would call the human factor. It changes
Or
with
the inhuman factor for some people.
whatever. It changes with everyone we meet. Okay, then this is an interesting, ladies, and for the gents too. Make yourself look nice in something you feel good in. She says, I'd never wear anything new, as it just adds too much extra pressure. I would choose something appropriate for the setting, and that showed off my figure and made me look feminine and casual. Definitely not trying hard to look sexy. In other words, just be a little relaxed about how you dress.
Yeah, I agree with that. As you know, I lean more toward the Victorian end and the show-it-all end. And when I see some of these low-cut, cleavage-prone dresses on television, I kind of gag and want to use the remote, make that person remote.
Oh, I thought guys like that under any circumstances.
No, I do not want this kind of show and tell of my body or someone else's body.
Right away, anyway.
Yeah, I want to be attracted by their personality, and not.
That detracts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. If a person is dressed too sexily, then that would detract from getting to know the person who they really are. I kind of can see that. The next one is, do not go for, as she calls it, I didn't know this word, Dutch courage. This isn't paying for your own thing. It's having a drink beforehand. She says, I know of several disastrous first dates because one party turned up hammered. It's just not attractive. In other words,
Hammer.
Hammered.
I don't know that word.
Drunk.
Oh.
Maybe it's an easy. Meaning
I'm not a drinker, so I'm not in those
Well,
circles.
I'm just saying that people would. That's what she calls Dutch courage, having a drink before you go.
I cannot drink on an empty stomach, number one, and number two, with the medications I'm taking, it's unwise to do that. So I'm not.
Well, that probably happens. We're getting close in time, but I'll go through a couple more here. Focus on the other person. I'm not gonna go into detail on that. But she does give some specifics. Compliments always work nicely. Finding something in that other person that's lovely, their eyes, their choice of whatever, you know.
I want to get back to our subject, which is the subject of our show, and that is resurrecting
Right.
love. And I want to ask you, without looking at what the Huffington Post says, what do you think are the ingredients to make a new relationship work? What do you have to resurrect in yourself, and what do you want to draw out of others to reconnect and have the confidence that you could do it again? This is a confidence issue.
I feel that myself as an individual, and I have done this, I took a number of years in between my last relationship and this one to just be on my own, to feel settled in my life as a single person. I didn't date at all for quite a few years. And then when the time came for me to date, I was ready to date, more so than many of the men I met who were not ready to date. They still had too much baggage. We're all going to bring some baggage after 55. But I took a lot of time to clear away some of the
There's
baggage.
sometimes goodies in that baggage.
Well,
So
that's
we
true.
We can't slant it to negative.
That's true.
Otherwise, it'd be full-term cynics. Okay.
And it's fairly, in this next point, it's fairly normal to discuss your marriage breakdown. That's not uncommon to discuss
But
why. Yeah.
you need to ask the other person's consent. Do they want to hear it, or how much of it do they want to unload? Because
Yeah, that's right. And that's the area that I'm always strong on. Just, touch on it, discuss it, but don't make that the whole point of the first date. I want to talk about this one, and then we'll have to wind it up, Lee. I'm seeing.
Yes.
Asking for a second date is tricky. Here's how it goes. Most men I dated asked me at the end of the first one for a second. This made it really hard to say no. One man she refers to as Muddy Farmer told me he had very much enjoyed our date when we parted, then called me up that evening to see how I thought our date went and to ask me if I'd like to meet up again. I thought this was a classy merger of sensitivity and confidence. So rather than on the date itself, give yourself a little space.
You need reflection time.
And then
Time out.
she says the first date is so tricky that unless you really didn't like the other party, this is your point, Lee, it's worth another go. You can really concentrate enough to decide if the person could be for you or not. In other words, you might just really take a disliking to this person and that's it. But if it's this way or that way, it's worth a second date.
Okay.
That's what you were saying.
Closing
before.
words. We have about 10 seconds left. Let us know.
Go ahead, Lee.
To merge requires two different personalities with attitudes. So keep an open ear and an open mind. Thank you for tuning in.
Bye.